So you're creating wedding films with amazing stories, beautiful moments, wonderful colours, but you feel like there's just something missing from your work, something that would take it to the next level. If that sounds like you, then you may want to consider a more in-depth and dynamic sound design in your wedding films. Well, you're in luck, because that's exactly what I'm going to be talking about in today's episode. If you don't know me yet, my name's Luke. I'm a wedding filmmaker from the UK, and here on the channel we talk about all things wedding filmmaking. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, I would love it if you subscribe to the channel and stick around for some more. So, sound design really is that magic sauce that takes your films to the next level and ties everything together. A dynamic sound design adds depth and realism to your film that can make your film a truly immersive experience for your viewer. And the really great part is, with a little bit of practice, it's very easy to incorporate into your workflow and implement into your work. And so in today's episode, we're going to walk through exactly how to create a dynamic sound design in your wedding film. Now, I edit with Final Cut Pro, and 95% of my sound design work is done right in Final Cut Pro. Now, it doesn't matter what platform you choose to edit on, be it Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve or any others, the principles are the same. So even if you're not a Final Cut Pro user, stick around, because you may learn something that you can implement in your own workflow. And it's my goal that by the end of this episode, you will understand exactly why sound design is so important to implement in your wedding film. You'll understand how to implement a comprehensive sound design into your workflow and be able to start using this newfound knowledge in your work straight away. Now, I know your time is valuable, and some of you may be a bit more advanced than others. So what I've done is I've broken this episode into chapters, so you can find the timestamps in the description below. So if you want to skip ahead to the bits that you want to find more information about, please feel free to do that. If you're a complete novice, then I suggest watching the whole video all the way through to pick up all the tips and tricks along the way. So firstly, let's ask ourselves, what is sound design? And simply put, sound design is how all the sounds in your film come together to create a soundscape that goes along with your visual narrative to really amplify the story, highlight certain bits, and bring that film to life. Now, this covers everything from the spoken word, that's the narrative you capture on the wedding day yourself, so that's things like your wedding speeches and your letter readings, interviews, that kind of thing. It also covers music, any sound effects you add in on top, it covers any transition sounds you're going to put in. It's how all these sounds interact together to create the entire soundtrack of your wedding film. And by using sound design cleverly, we can really enhance the big moments in the film that we want to. So think of things such as a crowd cheering as the couple take their first kiss. We want that to be a big, punchy moment, and that's normally when the music will come in and you get the big hit. But you also want the ambient sound of everyone cheering and clapping, and then depending on where you're taking the film from there, how the other sounds interact to carry the story along. But it can also help us do things like set the scene. So imagine an establishing shot where you've got trees and leaves blowing in the wind and the birds chirping and everything's calm. It's that kind of calm before the storm moment. Sound design can help us tell that part of the story. Adding these things in will draw our viewer into our film, immerse them in the experience, and make them feel like they were actually there. And so let's talk about, when are we going to use sound design? Well, we're going to be using sound design from the very start of our film to the very end. Everything we see on screen visually should have some form of sound attached to it. It's really important for us to bring back those feelings or drive that emotion home in our wedding film, and that's what starts making our wedding films more powerful. Now, I'm someone who firmly believes in that a picture paints 1,000 words, and so what I've done is I've put together a few clips from some real weddings that I've filmed, and I've put some sound design to it. So we're going to watch that now, and then we're going to jump into Final Cut and we'll see how I put that together. So let's roll the clip.
Now you will feel no rain, for each of you will be shelter for the other. Now you will feel no cold, for each of you will be warmth to the other. Now there will be no loneliness, for each of you will be a companion to the other. Now you are two persons, but there is only one life before you.
Okay, and I hope you can see from that clip that just by adding a few sound effects in, we can really start bringing out the story and highlight the bits of the scene we want our viewer to focus on. Let's look at where can we find these sound effects, how do we get hold of them, and how do we start creating a library for us to use on all of our wedding films. Now, the very first place to start is the audio we capture on the wedding day itself. And this is the easiest way to capture audio that is relevant to the film you're going to be making. You've already got the gear because you've got a camera and a microphone. And the best thing about this is, one, it's free. And two, you can then extract that audio file, put it in its own folder, and you can then use that in subsequent weddings. And I do this all the time. So if I'm then at a wedding further down the line and I need that kind of sound effect, I can go to my own library, pull it out, in it goes, and no one's any the wiser. Now, you can also find lots and lots of sound packs online. These range in quality and price. You can definitely search around the internet and find some sound packs designed for filmmakers to use in their films. So that's one option for you to go and look at. The next place we can find good sound effects and things for us to use in our sound design is music subscription sites, places like Artlist, Soundstripe, MusicBed. Most of these subscription platforms now will offer a sound effect library that comes with the package that you pay for them with. Now, personally, I'm with Soundstripe. All the music you see in my films comes from Soundstripe. I'm not sponsored by them. And they also have an amazing sound effects library. And I think these subscription sites are one of the best places to find your sound effects because, one, you're already paying the subscription for the music anyway. So again, it's going to cost you minimal amounts of money. And they're always adding to these banks and libraries. You download it, bang, it's in the film. Really, really simple and a great tool to have as a wedding filmmaker. Or the other option is you can simply do these sound effects at home post-wedding. And I've done this a few times myself. So you get home, you're editing the film, and maybe you get to a bit where you didn't get some clean audio. Maybe there's some bridesmaids talking in the background, or there's some music playing during bride prep, or someone's talking, whatever it is. You decide that audio is not clean enough to use as the sound effect in your film. So recreate it at home. You've already got the camera, you've got the microphone. Find a quiet spot, find something that makes a noise that's similar, make the noise yourself, record it. There you go, it's in the film. And again, the only thing that's going to cost you is your time, which makes it a fantastic tool for us as wedding filmmakers. Now, enough talking, let's jump into Final Cut. As you can see, I've got the little sequence we did earlier, but I've stripped all of the sound design I did earlier out. And what we're going to do is we're going to rebuild it as a step-by-step guide. So before we do that, let's explain what I've got going on the screen. Other than the beautiful Grace and Ben, whose wedding was absolutely epic. If you haven't yet seen their wedding film, I'll link it in the card up here. Now, there are many different ways to organise your footage and organise the things you're going to be using in your film. Now, I'm not saying that I have a workflow that is better than anyone else's. I'm just saying that this is the workflow that works for me. So I like to put all of my sound effects and all of my footage in separate events. As you can see here, I've already created a sound effects event. These are all my sound effects. And like I said, I've got literally thousands and thousands of sound effects I've built up, and these get dropped into every single project that I do. Now, I am planning on doing an episode in the future about my entire organisation process of how I organise my footage and my clips and my timelines to make my wedding films. If that's something that you think would interest you, then leave me a comment down below and let me know if you want to see that or not. Now, as you can see, I've already set up my project here, but there's only one thing we need to change when we're setting up our new project before we start editing. And let me show you what that is. So if we go to File, New, Project, and the only thing you need to do is jump down here to where it says Audio and make sure that Surround is ticked. And that's if you want to edit how I'm going to edit now. Let's talk about audio levels. There's a lot of confusion about what audio levels should be designated to what and how loud things should be. So let's go through that now. We can see that this is our audio bar on the side here. If you don't see this, if you come next to where your timestamp is and you click the little bars here next to the timestamp, if you click that, that'll bring up your audio bars. Now, if you've set up your project with stereo, you're only going to see two bars here. You'll see a left channel and a right channel. But with surround, you can see that we've got 6 channels. And what surround does is it allows us to move the sound around the room in a 360-degree orientation. So if you've got something happening on the left-hand side of the screen, you can have the sound playing out of the left-hand side. If the sound moves across the screen, you can move the sound with the subject. So it just gives you a lot more options to make that sound design a lot more realistic. So that's why we want to use surround. And this is what we're going to be using to see how loud or how quiet our sounds are. Now, it is important to remember that when we're editing audio, everything we do is additive. So what that means is if you have a track at minus 20 decibels, and then you put on top of it another track at minus 20 decibels, the overall readout is going to be louder than minus 20 decibels. It doesn't stop at minus 20, they add together. And so that's why it's important to follow this process when we're going to start layering audio, because we're going to have a lot of clips stacked on top of each other, all competing. And so if we don't know what audio levels we're going to be working at, then it can get very loud, very distorted quite quickly. But with a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of know-how that we're about to go through, I can help you avoid that completely. And so let's talk about where certain sounds should sit on our audio meter. Now, for narrative, spoken word, anyone speaking, those voices should come in at between -8 and -12 decibels. That's where you're aiming, that little bracket there. That means your voices will be clear and audible, and they should sit above, slightly above everything else, because especially for us as wedding filmmakers, it's our narrative and our story that drives our wedding film. It's what makes our films unique to that couple. And so the narrative is really, really important. Next, we have our music tracks or our score. For me, I found personally that around -30 dB works best for music. But you want your music track to sit underneath everything else, and all your sound effects happen slightly above it, so you can still hear them through the music and the music isn't too overpowering. Now, your ambient sounds, that will be things like your wind, your birds, anything that's happening in the generic scene, anything around the scene that you would hear if you were stood at that scene at that time. You want those sounds to come in anywhere between -20 and -25 dB. And then we've got our direct sound effects. Now, everything I classify as a direct sound effect is anything visually you see on the screen. So, for instance, if someone goes to do a cheers and the glasses clink, that's a direct sound effect. We're physically seeing that happen on the screen, and we're adding in a sound effect that happens for that physical thing. Footsteps on the ground, a laughter, that kind of thing. Anything we visually see that we want to draw a sound effect to, that's a direct sound effect. That's different to the overall landscape of the ambient sound effects of wind and birds and that kind of thing. So your direct sound effects, what you want to aim for somewhere around -20 decibels. And then we've got our transitions and effects. So these are your whooshes, your bangs, your suckbacks, your risers, any of those cinematic style sound effects you want to add in. Again, you want to aim to have those at around -20 decibels. Now, all sound effects are different, and depending on what library you've got them from, whether you record them yourself, whether you've downloaded them from a subscription site, whether you've bought a pack, every sound effect will react differently when you bring it into Final Cut. So the ranges I've given you are a rough guide. Some sound effects will need to be louder, some will need to be lower. This is where you need to have some good headphones, listen in and see what each sound effect is doing. Now, the big thing we need to remember is we don't want to clip or distort our audio. So what do we mean by clipping or distorting our audio? We don't want anything to go above 0 decibels. Anything above 0 decibels would be clipped. It's distorted, blown out, and quite hard to listen to. And as I said earlier, the narrative for us as wedding filmmakers is the most important part, and we want that to be the loudest part of the film. And if we're doing that between -8 and -12 dB, you can see that we don't want to go anywhere near 0, and this method will keep us well below that and make sure that all our sounds sound exactly how they should. So what we're going to do now is we're going to sort out our organisation in the timeline first to make it really clear to us what sounds are doing what. And this will help us later on down the line if we do encounter some problems where sounds are clashing with each other or one sound is too loud, then we know exactly where in that timeline to go to, what sounds are doing what. And I personally believe the key to a really good film and a really good edit is organisation and being able to see things really, really quickly. And so what we're going to do is we're going to colour code each one of our audio groups a different colour so we can see very quickly what's doing what. And this also then gives us the added advantage of being able to turn off and on an entire group at a time. Now, as you can see, I've already got 2 sounds on the track. So we've got the music track, which is already sat on there, and we've also got the narrative. Now, I looking at this now, it's obviously all blue, and we want to change that so I can see what sounds are doing what. So we come to our music track here, which is the top one. We can right click, you come down to assign audio roles, and you can see here that there's 3 roles as standard in Final Cut. You've got dialogue, effects, and music. Now I don't tend to like using these color schemes, and I like to do my own. So let's go all the way to the bottom, and you can see here an option that says edit roles. So we're going to click that. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up, we can click this little plus sign here. It's going to bring up a new box with a new color. So we can name that. So let's do this as SFX, sound effects. So sound effects is what I would call anything ambient. So here we go. And I always have this color coded as red. We'll do that again. Let's this time do narrative. Now narrative, I always do in orange. It's just nice and bright and I can see it. And again, I keep these colors the same for every single project. So no matter what file I open up, no matter how long ago the wedding film was, I can still see what all these sounds are doing and what sounds need to come with that clip. Then let's do direct sound effects. So again, direct sound effects is going to be anything we see visually happening on the screen. I like to do this in a bit of a turquoise color. Then we're going to do on-camera audio or the scratch audio, and that's just stuff you recorded on the day itself, and I like to make that a nice gold color. And we'll add another one. This time it's going to be our transitions, and I like to do that in purple. So now you can see we've got a whole list of different audio groups in different colors. So now we can hit apply. I can come back to my music clip, go assign audio roles, and all I've got to do is click music, and it turns the clip green. So this being our narrative, we can come here, we can go to audio roles, narrative, orange. There we go. And now it's far easier to see what is my music track and what is my narrative. Now this looks quite simple at the moment because there's only 2 tracks. But when you've got all those groups filled out on a long 5 to 7 minute wedding film, there's going to be hundreds and hundreds of pieces of audio. And so this organization really comes into its own when we start getting into that level of editing. Okay, so we've talked about how to set up our project. We've talked about how to organize everything so that we can find things easily. And now it's time to do the exciting bit, which is to start throwing in some sounds and start bringing this to life. Now, the process I use for editing audio is really, really simple. And we're going to be doing something that I like to call sweeps. But what we're going to do is we're going to concentrate on one audio group at a time. We're going to switch everything else off. And we're going to go through our film entirely, adding all those relevant bits of audio in so that we can just listen to what those sounds are doing. What that allows us to do is to get everything at the correct levels. And then we can turn that group off and we start again with the next group. Now, if you have no idea what I mean by switching things on and off, let me show you. So we're going to come to our index panel, which is down here. If you click on the index panel, and so all the groups we've used will be listed in the index panel. And so you can see here our option for music. Now, if I untick music, you can see it grays it out on our timeline, which means it won't play anymore. And this is what I mean. By organizing in this way, I can turn off entire groups of sound effects to work on other groups of sound effects, rather than going on and disabling each clip individually. This is a really quick and effective way of doing that. And so what we're going to do, we'll go to the start of our film, and as you can see here, we've got this opening shot. Now that we're looking at this scene, we're going to think, what do we think we would hear if we were back there now in real life? Obviously, we want some waves crashing. We want a little bit more of like a high altitude wind because it's the drone and we visually know we're flying. So maybe some higher altitude winds would suit that well. So time to don on the headphones. Let's come to our panel over here. If we come to the search icon, and this is what I mean by you start labeling your sound effects, you can find them really easy. So let's just type in C. And here you go. I've got several sound effects that have come up, and we've got one here that says Rocky Beach Soundscape. It sounds good. That's a little bit of high altitude wind and some sea sounds. So we'll drag that into our timeline. Excellent. We're going to trim that in. And now that we've dropped our first clip onto the timeline, let me show you something really, really cool that we can do. So if we come over to our inspector panel, we'll take ourselves off the information bar, we'll go to the sound. We can do some really cool things here to change, manipulate and bring out the sound so it sounds the best. So the first thing I like to do is change the equalization to music. So let's do that now. Go to music enhance. Now you can see, I don't know if you saw the jump there, it increases all the levels of the clip. But now we can come down to the pan, and the pan is how it's going to be projected out of the speakers. So you can see here we've got all these different options: basic surround, create space, dialogue, music, ambience, and all these different settings will make the sound come out of the speakers when the film is being played in a different manner. I want this as ambience because I've already got my music track set to music, and what that does is it gives it an even distribution amongst all speakers. I've also got my narrative set to music. I personally just find that rather than using the dialogue setting, the music setting gives it a bit of a bassier, more rounded feel. Now you can see here, this is the setup of the speakers in a mocked up room, and this is going to show you where it's going to push the sound effect from. And so in this little circle diagram, you are in the middle and you are facing 12 o'clock straight up, and that's you watching the TV screen, and then the speakers are dotted around you. You can see that by clicking the ambience setting, we're going to be affecting the speakers behind us more than we are in front of us. We're still going to get a little bit coming out of the front, but it's mainly behind it. We can see, I can already tell here that this is going to be far, far too loud. So we're going to drop this down. Let's start at -20, and then let's replay this and watch our audio meter on the side here. Now you can see I've got a little bit too quiet there, so we can nudge that up, bring it up to about 17. Perfect. So we're hitting about 22 decibels, -22 decibels there, like just under the 20. Perfect. So let's move on to our next scene. Now, as you can see, another seaside setting. So we've got this one here with a few seagulls, and sort of the sea is a bit distant. I kind of like that. So let's select a little piece of that, chop that in, trim that off, and again, come straight up to our inspector panel, go to our equalization. We're going to go music enhance, and we're going to come down, hit ambience, drop it to -20, play that and see how loud it is. So okay, a little bit quiet, so we'll just nudge that up a touch. Perfect. Now, as you can see, there is a difference between the audio, the volume level I'm setting it at, and what it's actually playing at. This is what I mean by different sound effects will be played in different ways. So we've got our volume set at -17 decibels, but if we play this back again, watch our audio meter, you can see we're -27, -28, that's sort of topping out at. And so this is why it's important to go through each clip, see exactly where it's coming, and we tinker with those noises as they cut. So I'm actually going to button that up to about a -15 there. So now we've done that, let's have a little rewatch of how the first two clips are now sounding. You can be creative with this. You don't have to just stick to what you see on the screen. You can add in things that you think you might hear in that scene, and that's what starts adding the realism to it. And so if we come to our next clip here, so again, come up to our little search panel here, we can get rid of that. Let's just type in rain. Okay, now you can see we've got lots and lots of different sound effects for rain. So we're going to go through. Quite like that one. So drag it out. Add this on, trim it down. Now what you can do is start speeding this process up, because everything you're doing within this group, so at the moment we're doing our ambient audio, all my settings are going to be the same. So I want them all to be musically enhanced in the equalizer. I want them all to be on the ambient pan level, so they all play out the speakers at the same way. And I also want them to be all roughly the same volume level. So what I can do is I can come back to my previous clip, I can highlight it, click on it, I can do Command C for copy, come to this clip and I can do Command Shift V. That's going to bring up my paste attributes panel. And as you can see there, we can copy our volume, our pan and our equalizer settings to this clip. So rather than going through and clicking each one, this is going to start saving you some time. Paste that in, take a listen. But maybe we need a little bit of something extra with that. We need a little bit of trees or wind. So if we type in wind into our panel, and let's come up to this one. So we just got some soft wind in the background there. Quite like that one, just a generic sort of wind sound. Now I'm going to drop this underneath because I want it playing on the same track. Trim that down. Again, same settings, Control Shift V, hit enter, and now we can play both of those together. Excellent. And then if we look at our audio meter again for that, you can now see that both of those are hitting around negative 20 decibels. Great, exactly where we want them to be. Now, rather than waste your time watching me edit, I'm going to finish this sweep and then we'll come back and see what I've done for the whole film. Okay, so we're in a good place. Now remember, we haven't gone through this sweep to add in every single sound effect we can. We just want that sort of low-level ambience of what noises would be happening in each scene. So what's next? So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight all these clips. So we're going to click and drag across all these clips. Now we're going to right-click on one of them. I'm going to come to audio roles, and we're going to put these as our sound effects, and they're going to go to red. Now what we can do is we can either uncheck this box and we can carry on with our next sweep, or if you want to hear how it's all sounding, you can click these boxes back on and we can then listen to how the track is sounding as a complete unit. And all we would do from here is repeat this process again and again until we had each layer of audio in, and then all we do at the end is listen to the whole thing and make sure nothing's competing and nothing's clashing with each other. And this process of doing sweeps and concentrating on one type of audio at a time, one type of sound effect at a time, is really what allows you to layer up these effects and these sounds, and is what gives you a really dynamic soundscape across your entire film. Okay, so instead of you sitting here watching me edit, what I'm going to do is I'm going to crack on, I'm going to finish this sequence up, and what we'll do is we'll catch up in a minute when I've done that. Okay, so I've just put the finishing touches to that clip and all the audio editing. As you can see here on the screen, I've got all my different elements of audio. So let's take another look and see the whole thing as a complete soundscape.
Now you will feel no rain, for each of you will be shelter for the other. Now you will feel no cold, for each of you will be warmth to the other. Now there will be no loneliness, for each of you will be a companion to the other. Now you are two persons, but there is only one life before you.
Now, the only other thing I would do on top of this is I would go through and duck my audio, and that's a process whereby you can chop up certain clips, group them again together, and you can lower the volume of certain tracks so that your narrative stands out even more. Now, I'm not going to go through that today because I've got that coming up in a future episode. So again, if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that. If you found this interesting, you'll definitely find the ducking audio episode interesting when that gets released in a few weeks' time. And if you've made it this far and you're enjoying this video and you've learned something, please leave me a comment down below and let me know that. And so, as you can see, it's a really, really powerful tool to use, and it's such an easy thing to do. And it's amazing that with a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of organisation, and a little bit of tweaking and practice, we can implement this in our work and really take our films to that next level. Sound design is now a core part of my editing workflow, and this whole process for a 5 to 7 minute highlights film probably takes me in the region of 3 to 4 hours. Okay, so now we've gone through the process of sound design and understanding what it is and what we need to do. But now let me give you some tips for when you go out and try this on your own. Okay, so my first tip would be to get some good headphones. As you see, I've got mine here. I wouldn't be using things like Apple AirPods or in-ear buds or noise-cancelling headphones. You want something that's open back and lets a bit of ambient noise in. But investing in a good set of editing headphones will make this process A lot more enjoyable and B, a lot more accurate. Tip number 2 is no matter what you're using to listen to your audio as you're editing, remember to keep an eye on that audio bar. It doesn't matter how loud you've got it in your ears, you should be going off the measurements on the audio levels within Final Cut or your native editor. Okay, we can turn the volume up and down in our headphones. It doesn't change how loud that is playing across the whole project. And so you really do need to keep an eye on the audio levels and make sure that you're keeping roughly within those bands that I went through earlier. Tip number 3 is going to be that understated is always better than overstated. It's better to have a sound design that is slightly too quiet than one that is overpowering. And that's the trap a lot of people fall into when they first start dipping their toe into this and experimenting, is that they make certain sounds too loud or certain sounds that don't make sense and it's a bit jarring. So just make it a little bit low key when you first start, creep that audio up as you go, and make sure it's sort of a nice complement to the film. It doesn't overpower or overtake the film. Tip number 4, like we said, is to keep everything organized. Any sound effect you create or you save, make sure it's in one folder so that every project you can grab that folder, dump it into Final Cut, all your sounds are there ready to go, and again that'll help you speed up your editing process. Tip number 5 is that this process is one of the last things to implement in your editing workflow. So when I come to sit down to do this, the film is completely edited visually. It's color graded, all the transitions are in, everything visually is done with the film, and the audio is always the last thing I edit because it gives me then that last bit of twisting power to really make the big impactful moments that little bit more impactful. Quite a bit is a bit more magical, and so you can really start twisting the film and complementing it with the sound design, but the main bulk of the film needs to be done. And my final tip for you today would be, once you've completed your sound design, you need to export the entire project, your entire film, and then listen to it on a number of different devices. So for me personally, once the film is exported, I airdrop it to my phone and I watch it on my phone first. Why do I do that? Well, because in this modern day and age, when I send a wedding film to a client, that is how they're probably going to watch it, and it's certainly how their friends and family are going to watch it. And so if it doesn't sound right on a phone, and I appreciate this is the same issue we have with color grading, where you want to have like a central point and you can't worry too much about what other devices are doing, but it's a good way of determining whether you've got it right. If you listen to your film once on a TV screen and once on your phone, if the same sound is popping out and distracting you, then it's probably a distracting sound, and you can jump back into the edit, lower that sound before you get out the final edit. And so there we have it, how to create a dynamic sound design in your wedding films in just a few easy steps. And as you've seen, creating a dynamic sound design for our wedding films doesn't need to be an overwhelming or daunting task. As long as we stay organised, layer the audio appropriately, and have a clear goal in mind about how we want to enhance our film, it can be a really, really effective skill set. It was my goal today that you would understand why having a dynamic sound design in your wedding films is so important, that you would understand how to implement a dynamic sound design into your wedding films and your workflow, and that you'd be able to go away and start implementing this knowledge straight away. If you did find this video helpful in any way, I'd really appreciate if you hit that like button so that other filmmakers just like yourself can discover this video. Thank you again, and I'll see you in the next episode.